I'm Beth from smartsocial.com. Normally around this time each week, Andrea and I meet in our virtual coffee shop to talk about what we're working on and what we've learned from this week about social media and how to keep our kids safe online. With spring break schedules and spring germs, Andrea and I did not get a chance to record our chats this week about what we're working on, but I did get to meet with author Donna Cooner. I mentioned on Mom Talk recently that my middle school daughter found the book offline at her school book fair, and we both really fell in love with the characters and the message about going offline from a group of teenagers and their perspectives. Donna has several novels directed towards teenagers on the topic of social media, such as Offline, Skinny, Can't Look Away, and Fake. She's also the author of 20 picture books and has written for PBS TV shows for children. It was a great experience to talk with Donna about why she feels compelled to tell these fictional stories. And we discovered that she and I are connected not on social media, but through my alma mater, Colorado State University, where she teaches future school administrators in their School of Education. You'll hear us chat about memories from Fort Collins, Colorado, and how realistic her books felt as I was reading them. I highly recommend Donna's books for teenagers, but also for parents who want to understand how teenagers are thinking, especially about these social media struggles that we didn't grow up with. I'm excited to share my interview with Donna Cooner with you. How did you come up with these topics? Why have you spent so much time telling these stories?
Actually, my first book that had an internet interaction with it was Can't Look Away, which is about a beauty vlogger, young teen who goes on YouTube and does these makeup tutorials and has a huge following. And all my stories start with something personal that's happening in my life. And then it takes a what if and really goes off into the fictional world. But I want that really personal connection to the character to have a feeling that it's very much connected to who I am personally, so that emotion, I hope, comes through in the story. So in this particular story, my first book had come out, which was called Skinny. It had a lot of press, and I was doing a lot of press, and it got some wonderful awards, and it did online and everything. But all of a sudden, I was getting on social media some personal comments and some criticism that was very much personally based to me, not about the book. And I suddenly thought, that makes me feel, made me feel really bad. And I thought, there's like 100 positive things that people are saying about this book, and there's one negative thing, but it's very personal. It's very much attached to my own self. At the same time, all this buzz was going on about this first book. My mother was really sick and was passing away from cancer. And I was dealing with sort of this real world tragedy at the same time that I was dealing with this online world of promoting this book. And so that's the personal connection that I said, I want to tell this story about someone who's dealing with a tragedy in their real life and dealing with a whole lot of buzz in the internet world. And that's where Can't Look Away came about. The girl in the story, her sister is killed in an accident, and so she's dealing with this tragedy, but then she has hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers that are following her makeup tutorials and commenting and doing all this stuff. And so that was the first time I did a book that had this online element of it. And it went over really well. Scholastic picked it up in their book fair and their book club, and it seemed to resonate with readers. This is a world we're living in right now where this is a part of our lives for good and bad, and I wanted to show it in a fictional story, and that's where I started writing these books. And then from then on, they took different sides of what was happening on the internet world, but how it influenced the real world of teenagers.
Have you worked with teenagers before? I think for me as a mom, the powerful part is hearing how they're thinking. I can ask my daughters all these questions and she'll just say, I don't know, or she'll give me some blank response. But reading
Yeah.
it was just so eye-opening to me as a mom. How did you capture that thought process?
I think part of it is I am a teacher. I'm an educator. I teach teachers at CSU. I now teach mostly teachers who want to become school principals. So I'm in and out of schools all the time. I'm hearing what kids are saying to each other and talking to each other. I also do a lot of research on my books. The book about the teenage beauty vlogger, I must have watched 1,000 tutorials on how to do a cat eyeliner, and I never did learn how. But anyway, I read a lot of comments and just was shocked by some of the viciousness of the comments, and also amazed at the connections that were made through various social media ways that people connected with each other that didn't even know each other face to face, but they connected through the various forms of social media. So definitely lots of research, but also just being around teens a lot through my work and through where I've been. I think that's a lot of it as well.
I get the sense that you knew teenagers.
I think I'm a teenager in my head. I'm about 15 years old, I think, in my head anyway. So
That's
a
awesome.
lot of it's very natural for me.
Good. Young at heart. That's what we all need.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think very specifically in offline, one thing that I noticed was when Annie, the main character, when she breaks up with her boyfriend and goes into this personal tragedy, she doesn't talk to her parents about it. And that really broke my heart. Like, I know her mom is busy, her dad works a lot, they're planning a wedding for their sister, but why did you decide to leave the parents out of that discussion?
I started that book as I wanted to focus on the real friendship between the three girls and how close they were. And I wanted the focus of the book to be on these three very different girls and how that friendship was affected and impacted by the internet situation that they were going through and all of that. So I really wanted the focus to be on that. I think that would have been a great idea at the time that you mentioned it. Yes, I have a teenage son, and I'm like you talking about your daughter. Sometimes when you ask them about something and they're like, okay. He tended to talk to me more in the car for some reason. That was the place where we got the conversations, but he was very reluctant to talk to me about relationships. A lot of times he would talk to his friends first. But even so, I think that might have been a great idea to do at the beginning. It may not have been the great idea to do as an author because it wouldn't have led to the conflicts that occurred. So it was probably a decision that I made, and I don't even consciously remember making the decisions, but I'm always thinking about ways that the character's going to have conflict, and then how are they going to resolve that conflict and what's a realistic conflict. So that probably would have helped resolve the conflict earlier, to talk to the parents and have them involved and to get advice from them, but it may not have been the best story to hold the interest over the whole book. I will say, without spoilers, that at probably Annie's lowest point, it's her family that sort of comes to the rescue in a scene that really helps her begin to heal and look at things differently. And I think that's a really important part of the book.
She has some great friends, and that was so heartwarming to me that her friends were the ones that just jumped in immediately and said, let's
Mhm.
find a way to fix this. Let's all do it together. It's not just you, it's all of us. I hope that my daughter has those types of friends, but
Exactly.
I hope that she'll also talk to me. And I think as a parent, you're very right that they may not come to us first. I wish they would. I wish they would talk to us. But I think just as a parent reading this, it tells me some things to look out for. And one of the things that we talk about at Smart Social a lot is social media has a lot of side effects. And one of those side effects is not enough sleep. And that is very clear in this book from the start to the finish, that even when they're trying to detach from social media, they're still not sleeping. I think it's just good points in general for parents too.
You asked a great question. Why did they do everything at once? Like they said, okay, we're going to have these rules, and the rules are you can't have your phone when you're eating, you can't have your phone when you're sleeping, you're going to be offline or whatever. My editor and I had a whole lot of conversations about what does it mean to go offline. And I wrote this book actually before the pandemic. It was pre-pandemic, and it actually came out in October 2020, which was horrible timing for a book. Because bookstores were closed, schools were pretty much closed, so a lot of the book fairs and book clubs and all that kind of stuff weren't working or going on. And then it was a book about being offline, which was almost impossible to do at that point. Students had to be online for classes. Their only connections with their friends were online often. So the topic was not timed well. However, I think at this point, everybody's coming back to the idea of I've been online for these past 2 years. Now this is a great opportunity to look at ways to be offline and in different ways. But I think that idea of all in is very teenage thing. It's we're going to do it and we're going to do it 10 different ways.
Yes.
And we're going to do it all at once and we're going to do it. And I think even as adults, a lot of times when we start a new health program or we're going to do it all at once and we're not going to do part of it. So I think that was definitely to show the characterization of, yeah, we're going to do it and we're all in and we're going to do all these different things. And I think that showed maybe it could have been easier to pick one thing to try, and that just wasn't their nature.
I think if, again, if a parent was working with them, maybe we could have helped them narrow it down and say, that's going to be really hard to do everything all at once. Let's start with one thing.
Right.
And work into it. But I loved that high school girls came up with these ideas and could reflect on what was impacting their lives and were figuring out how to fix it themselves.
I think the idea of being off social media was a great idea to say we're just not going to do social media. But even as an adult, if I go online for one thing, I'll suddenly start to drift over to another thing. I think it's really hard once you're online not to take a quick peek at Twitter or take a quick peek, even if you say, I'm going to not do this. So I think being offline, it would be great to have a discussion with your whole family about, hey, what does offline mean to you guys? And what if we took an offline break? And what would that mean? What could we do if we were considered offline? And what wouldn't we do? And how would we support each other? And all of those things would be great conversation to have.
And in offline, you talked about each of the main characters finding kind of a different source of filling their time and filling their thoughts and filling their attention. And I love that each one of them was so different in where they went, but they found their interests because each one of them really found a new interest in that time instead of spending it on social media. Yeah, I love that. But I still love how throughout the book, Annie talks about, if I was online, I would post this hashtag. That made me laugh so much because our way of thinking has often shifted into how would I share this? And she was still able to think that way. She just couldn't follow through with it. So I think the quote that I love the most is when everybody was talking and they said, it's not just about being left out. It feels so isolating. So would you have any tips for students that may be thinking about taking an offline challenge of how to make it not feel so isolating?
I think I would say try to find ways to be involved if you wanted to be. Some of the tips in the book of finding actual activities, obviously, but even if you were going to be online and be online in a healthier way, maybe what you could do, think about things that bring you joy online and not things that tear you down online. For example, I love to travel. And so Instagram is my happy place. And I follow people and things about traveling and where they're going and what it's like there. And I think about traveling to that particular place or planning a trip. And that comes through in some of Annie's feelings as well. And again, a lot of my own feelings come through in the book and places that I go. So I think if you like silly dances and you like to learn them and you like to play around with them, then do that on TikTok and follow people that do that. But if there's something that when you click on it, it's stressing you out, or a person or a thing, block it from that sense of that, from social media and from your interactions. So I think being very conscious about how you interact with social media. I think we do so much of it unconsciously. We just do it without thinking about what it's doing to our brain or what it's doing to our hearts, and we just do it very unconsciously. And so I think if you go into it with the idea of what is it that actually makes me happy when I scroll down my screen, and choose some things that do that. Find a group that makes you happy. I have a wonderful writing group I've been with for 10 years, and we're spread out all over the country, and we mostly communicate through social media in various ways. We get together about once a year in person, but that group really supports me through all the changes that have gone on throughout these years, these 10 years.
Mhm.
And so I would really encourage teens to find groups of people that open up their eyes to new connections and friendships, but also do it very consciously and very much focused on what brings them joy.
And that's something that we talk about a lot in all of our resources at Smart Social, is helping students find a positive purpose for the time that they spend online, that it's not just a all or nothing event of being on social media. So as I'm talking to my daughter about this, we started talking about, what do you think happens after this book? So that, I think, is a good challenge for all parents, is just to open those types of conversations with their kids. So maybe our family does a social media offline experiment of our own. See how it goes. It doesn't take a giant crisis or a personal
Right.
breakup. Make this happen and learn from the lesson. But we can all learn something, and then we can create our own stories that we don't see after the book.
I think that's a huge compliment.
I want not just students, but parents to read this book too. Our mission at Smart Social is to teach parents and teachers about social media and how to help their kids. We do a lot for students too, but really my recommendation is for parents to read this, just to get that perspective, and then open those conversations with their kids and have them read it too. So a family book club.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else you want parents to hear?
I love doing book talks and school talks, and I will visit classrooms for short periods of time via Zoom for free. I have done school visits all over the country. Those have slowed down because everybody's focused obviously on other things. But if a school or a teacher wanted to have a classroom talk with me and they've read the book or they have specific questions that they want to ask, I love talking about the internet, but I also just love talking about writing and talking to kids about creative writing. I never had an author visit my school. I never really met a real author until I was an adult. And so I think it's really special to have that conversation with an author. And if it's not me, then someone in your community that's an author, that inviting them into their classroom is a really powerful way for kids to see writers as real people, and that they can encourage new writers, young writers, to tell their stories. So I think that's a really important thing. A little tidbit of my background. I wrote a lot of picture books, and when I was writing for children, young children, when I taught kindergarten way back when. And I also wrote television shows. So I wrote the famous Barney television show for a while. So that's my claim to fame with the Barney, the big purple guy. Young people don't know about Barney, but there must be some kind of retro thing about Barney coming back. But then I wrote a lot of nonfiction for the academic world, and it's been so much fun to come back to fictional worlds and really teach through fiction. And I really enjoyed weaving facts and important information into a story, instead of just, as you say, just blurting it out or just lecturing about it or whatever. And that's been really fun for me to do.
I can definitely tell just the way your characters come to life, and it feels like a girl in Fort Collins that I would see in Old Town. That's just, I definitely got that sense. Talking to Donna was so much fun, and she truly is passionate about creating realistic characters and helping us see their challenges as real teens. My brothers grew up with Barney the Purple Dinosaur, so if you remember those videos, you'll know the life lessons that Donna works into all of her writing. If your school is interested in bringing Donna to your classroom to talk about social media or being a writer, you can find more information about her at donnacooner.com, and we'll link to that site in our show notes below. I highly recommend parents and teachers look into her book offline through the Scholastic book sales or on Amazon. I'd love to hear your thoughts about giving teens fictional books to help them realize social media lessons. I'm curious, have you done a family book club or a family challenge of going offline or social media together? I'd love to hear your story. You can contact us at smartsocial.com/contact or email me directly, beth@smartsocial.com. And we'll reach back out if we can use your story to help other families. Thanks for listening this week. Andrea and I hope to come back next week to share the tips that we've been learning about Reddit and how to block mature content through Google Play. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the smartsocial.com podcast with this week's topics from Beth and Andrea. If you enjoyed the Mom Talk discussion that we had today about all things social media from a mom's perspective, we invite you to join the smartsocial.com VIP program. As a very informed parent VIP member, you will learn about the dangers and benefits of social media for your kids and get tips every week to keep your family safe online, and most importantly, to teach your students how to shine online. We have over 130 detailed app guides that cover apps like TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, and 100 plus apps you might not have heard of, but your students may have visited or downloaded. Find out more and join today at smartsocial.com/VIP. Please remember to rate, subscribe, and review so we can continue to help more parents and educators just like you. I'm your host, Josh Oakes. As always, remember to keep it light, bright, and polite. We'll see you on the next episode. Have a great day.